I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Popcorn Talks Network, Anatomy of a Movie. Today we are doing the heartbreaking story of Still Alice. I am your host, Chloe West, joined by my two lovely brunettes on the other side of the panel over here, Sarah and Roxy.
Happy to be here. Heartbreaking story, but I'm really excited to talk about this one.
Yeah.
You started with that hard H, and I was like, is she gonna say horrible? And then you said heartbreaking, and I was like, no, that is fitting. I cried a lot during this film, but in a good way, because it was just, it felt so truthful, and it didn't feel pushed, and I just believed it, and it really carried me through the story with her.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of good things to say.
What overall thoughts of the film, Roxy? What do you think?
You know, I was ready to not like this film. I was walking into it thinking, I don't know how this is going to make me feel. I know that she's been getting a lot of credit for performance, but I haven't heard that much about the actual movie. And I was shocked that we haven't heard more about this movie and that more people haven't been seeing this just because of the story, because I think that it was a really, really courageous way to tell this kind of story, and that we don't see that often. So I really appreciated what they did.
Yes, sorry. But I agree with, I think that this movie does deserve a little bit more credit. I heard about it when they did the 1-week release in December. So it came out so they could get into all the award nomination categories, so it'd be up for it instead of its February release. So I had seen people going in and everyone come out bawling.
Really?
Out of every screening in December, people were just coming out just destroyed. And I was like, oh great. This is gonna be a doozy. And normally, like, when I know that's gonna happen, I like prepare myself and so it doesn't get me. And this one just still did, because I expected it to be really amped up, like over the top, and like big dramatic
trying to make you
music,
cry,
and like trying to show me that this was just a crazy disease and experience for someone to go through. But it was just, in a way, simple, and where they started and where they ended for her journey through this disease, I thought was really well planned and let me see a lot, because you did get to see different levels, but it also didn't take you through the point of how long we're watching her deal with this. We didn't have to deal. So I thought just their strategy of how they took on what they were going to show, the scenes they were going to show, the developments, was very well planned out.
So overall, what kind of rating would you guys give it?
Well, what system are we talking here?
Let's talk A, B, C, D, F.
I thought that this was B+.
Okay.
I'll give it an A-.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was, like an A-. I mean, it felt like torture to me because I couldn't stop crying. I honestly felt that the director and writer had, as if I was a wet cloth, and they were wringing me out the entire film. I could not contain any of my emotions. It was extremely embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing.
But I was one of those people leaving the screening just like, I am running to the bathroom to like wipe my face.
Yeah, I felt like there were so many times that I was cringing because I was very nervous we were going to make a couple turns.
Yes.
At points that I was like, don't do this. Like, oh, this is why the movie's not getting reviewed as strongly as I want it to. This is why. But then we went the way that I wanted it to, and I was like, oh, thank gosh.
Yeah.
Because it could have gone really bad a couple times.
It's funny how many scenes in a serious drama really do scare you. Like, almost more than like a thriller or a horror movie. Because there's the potential for things to go so wrong, and everything's on edge. Like, whether it be for me when watching this film, every time she was in the kitchen, it just really scared me because you hear stories.
She's making
about,
tea, you mean?
Yeah, you hear things about people burning down, like just
I think
forgetting.
they wanted that. Don't you think so?
Oh, of course.
Because the way Kristen Stewart was playing, like, you're making tea, and she's like, come on, chill out. But, like, the audience was feeling that emotion that Kristen Stewart was, which was like, oh my God, she's in the kitchen alone.
Or when she has to hold the baby.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously we'll talk about the bigger moments, but everything having to do with Butterfly, just the entire time I couldn't let go of it or forget about the folder on her desktop. Like, it just was consuming me. But yeah, like you're saying, in the kitchen with the tea, whether to micromanage or not to micromanage, whether to let somebody keep living out their life and do those small things that are what make their day-to-day worthwhile. It's tricky, there's always going to be risk involved. So I thought that the family did a really good job balancing that.
Yeah, let's talk about the storyline. So it focuses on Alice, who is a professor of linguistics at Columbia, and she's a mother of 3 children. She's written textbooks. She's highly regarded. They begin the story with her giving a speech to UCLA. And so you already know she's very, very smart. They set that up for you immediately. And I feel like when she forgets at the first... So let's actually talk about the whole story first before we get into the specifics. But so then she gets diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. And it's very serious already. And she deteriorates very quickly. And it's the story of the deterioration and her trying to live through that and her family being affected and how they live through it.
How quickly did you guys think that actually was? So obviously for us it was an hour and 40 minutes, but for her, how quickly was quickly?
I think it was, they definitely had this summer. I want to say it was a year because she kept talking about how the next year she wanted him to take the sabbatical and spend the year with her. So I feel like it was a year.
I would give it a year or more, just based on, like, definitely under 5 years, but I think a year or more, because I was basing it kind of on the side story of her daughter getting pregnant and how long that takes. Being that she can't have kids, they talk about an appointment coming up to get fertility testing. I know that takes
maybe even a year and a half.
Takes a couple months, and then to get pregnant, have a child. Obviously, that's another 9, and then you get and then her story goes beyond her daughter having twins.
By the point her daughter has the twins, she's still able to talk, she's still able to walk, she's still able to function. So,
So I would say probably about 2, but I liked that they weren't exactly clear on how quick it was happening. It was happening quickly, and it wasn't that precise because we were seeing it from her point of view, which I thought was a very strong choice in the storytelling. Because if they made everything, I felt like the ambiguity of time lent itself to kind of her mental state, where you don't really know what's going on. And where there's one cut where she loses her phone, and then it's like a scene or 2 later that her husband finds it. And she's like, oh, that was last night. And to the audience, it was last night. But to then it was a month.
Right. That's why I brought up the whole experience of time, because for me, I love that they actively chose not to say day 24 or 1 month, you know what I mean? Because it was one long day for me. The whole thing was just this one long experience that was going on for what seemed like forever, but also seemed like a tiny amount of a slice of life.
I think it's interesting too, because I feel like if we think about Alice's point of view and her sense of time, she doesn't really know how much time is passing, what day is what day, and from last night to it was actually a month. So I think it is interesting that they sort of let the audience live in her time world a little bit too.
Yeah. Right, which is... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree, and then I was going to switch the subject, so if you have something to say on this, continue.
Well, I just think it's an important point that you bring up, that this was coming from her point of view on the time, because the entire film, why I said I think it's so unique, is the whole film was coming from her and not coming from somebody else, which we see all the time. I mean... I thought that the choice to view things from her eyes was so interesting and incredibly difficult to accomplish, because how do we know? How does anybody know?
And the storyline itself is very interesting because there's not really this giant, it's not like a normal storyline that we see. There's not this giant conflict that once they resolve that conflict, then the movie is on its way to, being over. We sort of didn't know how they were going to end this film, whether they were going to show her dying, or did you guys think she was going to commit suicide, when she did accidentally open the butterfly folder and things, just little things like that, or like, was she, when the suicide attempt sort of failed, was she going to end up in a home, like what she didn't want? And I just thought it was interesting, and I'm really, really pleased with the way that they ended it, because I didn't sort of want them to end it with just her dying or her being in a home, or it was sort of like, okay, like this is the story of somebody who is living with Alzheimer's and their family dealing with it. And that was, the 1.5 years or the 2 years of the diagnosis. And so I thought it was really interesting. And I sort of liked that it was one of those movies without a major plot, but they still did it so well and they kept you going. Sometimes you see those films and you're like, I can't sit through this, or like there's nothing happening, but it was great.
For me, speaking to the ending, I liked the idea behind the ending. I agree. I liked that she was in her home. She was with a family member. And
do you mean the exact scene, like the love scene, the exact ending?
I'm talking about the exact scene. I liked that they connected to theme. I liked it that she was at a point that I felt like if you had continued the film, it would have been, it was already heart-wrenching and it would have just been depressing.
Yes.
Because we leave her with like the inability to speak and she can get one word out. And watching past that at some point, because it was just such the struggle to remain herself and to show that she has this life within her, even if she can't express it. And I was still feeling that in the last scene. Like I could just still see her completely there. And that's what I wanted. And that's what I felt like we were attained to, is that she still has this identity, even if she isn't able to vocalize it, even if she doesn't have this use of language. The individual scene itself, with the ending monologue from the play, wasn't my absolute favorite moment of the film. The person I was with was very confused that it ended. My friend was just like, what? And I was like, I get it. I understood why. If you have some, and then
about the ending, I thought it was them saying to us, we're going to spare you. We're going to spare you what's about to get to be really bad. They let us live her life with her till the point that it was going to be unbearable to watch. And I think a lot of films make the mistake of going into that unbearable territory.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's necessary, but for this, a title called Still Alice, they want to show us Still Alice, and she was about to not still be Alice. So I thought that where they ended it, like you, Sarah, was really a nice spot, but I also kind of agreed that the closing monologue, it didn't stick with me. All I remember was that she thought it was something about love. This means love to you. And I don't know, I thought they could have picked something a little more powerful, although I don't know what that would have been.
Right. They could have ended it, I was thinking, when she gave the speech. When she gave her speech to the Alzheimer's Association, because it's still being her and she still is like, pulling for what she had been doing, and she was so proud and worked so long on it. And I thought that might have been a nice ending, but I did like the way that they ended it. And I agree, like, this film for me was torture in the sense that I was so emotionally in this film. I thought everybody was doing such a great job. And oh my gosh, it would have been unbearable if the movie would have kept going on, and
right.
like emotionally.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad it did end. But yeah, it was an interesting way to end it. But were you guys thinking the whole time with Kristen Stewart's character, like, why doesn't she move back? Why doesn't she move back? Because I was thinking that a lot.
Well, she does.
She does eventually, yeah.
Okay.
But, early on when they talk about the Mayo Clinic and who can take care of her and him moving.
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because I think that you as a child would be tempted, if your parent is very sick, to move home. I think that that's obviously a question on your mind, and she seems to be a good child, so it definitely was a question on her mind. But there's also the fact that her mom wants her to live her life, and knowing what would make her mom happy, and in her mom's final memories, thinking about her daughter taking care of her versus thinking about her daughter going and pursuing her dreams. I think it's a tough call.
Yeah, I think that to me it made sense when she did come home, because if you are being told, like, live your dream by a mom who, when she was on the other coast, was very still there. Like, that's when she was having all of the Skype conversations. So for me, that was rationalized by, I'm still having a relationship with her. I'm still talking to her. And at that point, her husband was still living with her.
Right.
And so for me, I understood why that transition happened when it did, because that was when her dad was leaving. And that's when it was that feeling that her mom was truly going to be alone and really needed someone. Versus I'm pretty sure you could rationalize that both of her parents were like, we're fine, we're together, we're supporting each other, you need to stay where you are and do what you're doing.
Yeah. Let's talk about Lydia, who is played by Kristen Stewart. Let's talk about her story and her character's role in this film, because she seems to be the daughter, she's the youngest daughter, and she seems to be the one who, although isn't following the family plan, is with Alice the most. Well, and you see like the whole beach house.
It's the surprise that she is the one who can really be there.
That, and I think she has some of the more interesting moments and more real moments that someone who has experienced anybody suffering from Alzheimer's, you sort of live your life, you sort of see yourself through Lydia a little bit. I think some of the best scenes, like when she comes to the beach house, and she's helping her there, and then her mom reads her diary accidentally and she gets mad at her, and things like, I think when people have Alzheimer's and they're lucid versus not being lucid, and I thought that this Lydia character was really the one like bringing it, and I thought Kristen Stewart did a great job.
Yeah, I have to say I completely agree. I think my favorite moment of the movie, there was a few that stood out to me, but was when Kristen Stewart does ask, or Lydia asks her mom about how she actually feels. What does it actually feel like? And her mom goes off and then says, "Thank you for asking." And you can tell nobody's asked her that. Nobody ever looked at her and said, what does this actually feel like? How is this actually affecting you? And so I do think that this daughter had a different grasp on the situation than the other children, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she had the only grasp. I think that there is validity to the way that the other kids were handling it also. People deal with things very differently, but I really liked watching this relationship. I thought it was very strong. And I loved that they didn't make her the daughter that didn't care. She's on the other side of the country, she doesn't call, she doesn't write. That would have been too much for me. The fact that she was still Skyping in, she did come home when she had to come home, she did have a special relationship with her mom. I thought that was really important.
When it comes to the children in general, I thought that all of them had a very strong purpose, in that they had a setup with how they acted with their mother, when she was lucid, when she was smart, when she was completely still Alice before the diagnosis. And then we got to see a transition for all of them, and how that they reacted and how they dealt with it and how it changed their relationship with their mother once she was diagnosed. All that, the points of view, I liked that they all came from kind of a different perspective, and they were trying to work together as a family, and it's not perfect. As it comes to Lydia, I thought the function of her in this movie was excellent. I thought that the scenes that she was given brought wonderful moments and wonderful conversation and thought. Felt like the purpose of all of Lydia's scenes were very strong, which is why we got memorable moments. But I felt like most of those she was bringing them out of Julianne Moore, which I loved, because it was moments like, how do you feel? But I was really listening to Julianne Moore's dialogue than Kristen Stewart's. And when I found that I had to pay attention to any of Lydia's play monologues or the monologue at the end, I would get pulled out of it. So it was very interesting to watch her question and to see what she was bringing out of her scene partner. But when it came to me just watching her, I was not fully engaged.
It's so interesting to me because I'm not her biggest fan. I have never been her biggest fan, and I just think she nailed this.
I think so too.
I just thought she did. When we're talking about the other kids, you said that you felt like they all had a function, and I agreed to an extent, but I really wanted to see more of the son. I felt like we didn't get his story as much, and I feel like this was such a movie about how everybody has their own way of dealing with it, and I don't know, there was something interesting about him, and watching him kind of lay back a little bit, I guess maybe that was his function, but I needed a bigger moment between him and the mom. I wanted to connect with each one of the children and feel like they all had purpose, and his purpose was a little lost on me.
I agree, because there were certain moments that you were beginning to connect with him, and then they sort of didn't let you. And one of them is when he winks at his mom before she's going up. You see their relationship there.
Right.
And then another one is when the family in New York is talking about what to do, and then he talks about, well, Lydia's going to be so upset. And you can tell that him and Lydia have a really good connection, and he's sort of the glue between the siblings, because obviously Anna and Lydia don't connect, and we see that clearly. So yeah, I agree. I'm sort of feeling like at a loss with this guy, but maybe there was a scene between them and it just got cut at the cutting room floor, because the movie, I think if it was any longer, would have been really long.
I agree.
So
does anyone remember what Julianne Moore's character's goal was to see from her son?
Graduate.
It was graduate. Because that's what I feel like they could have pointed to.
Yeah.
I didn't need to see the full graduation, but maybe some sort of point to that, because we get to see
Hannah have children.
We don't see Lydia go to college, but we do see her mom embrace her show,
and
which I feel like is a connecting
There's also
moment.
Conversation about it. Like they have the walk on the beach, and they talk about her not going to school.
Yeah. And I think her coming home a little bit was sort of like, like I'm not going to be going to school, but I'm coming home to take care. I'm still changing. I'm still making a choice in my life. And I think, but yeah, like then what about the son?
I felt like there needed to be some goal with that. For me, the relationship that I felt needed a little bit more was her husband. Not from the reaction standpoint, because I felt like he did have a serious point of view on how he was going to take this disease. Like, we did see him experience a lot of anger and frustration and confusion and diving into work, and I got that. What I missed was the foundation of him and her. As much as they put together what her relationship was with her kids, with her job, with the seminar at UCLA, with her running, all of that was kind of established for me. I understood her routine. I understood her family. I didn't get a chance to see the happy marriage before she was diagnosed.
I completely agree with that. There was a couple issues. This is what made it not an A- for me and the B+. It was the male relationships with her. So I felt like the husband, she keeps addressing how she had this great marriage. She says it in the butterfly video. She tells it to the doctor. We see that they did things together. They had gone on runs together. He did obviously stand by her, and he didn't leave her. But I didn't feel like, oh, this is a love story for the ages. And maybe I'm not supposed to feel like that, but I didn't even feel like, oh, this is a love story, period.
Yeah.
I just felt like he was kind of a caretaker, making decisions more for himself. And I'm sorry, I did want to scream at him at sometimes, take the year off.
Yeah.
I did. I wanted to say that. Sometimes I get financially, maybe they weren't able to do that, but then at least, I don't know, feel bad about it. I felt like he didn't care that he couldn't spend time with her, and I didn't feel like they were in love like she did. So I missed that, and I don't know whether it was in the script or whether it was his acting or what, but he just had this stoicness about him that I wanted to see at least one scene of him break down or say, I'm losing my partner or something, but we didn't get that.
Yeah, part of me likes that he didn't do that, because it felt realistic a little bit, like somebody who maybe was kind of just trying to keep themselves together while all this is happening, and he still is being a good husband, taking care of her and being patient and things like that. And so part of me liked it, but then part of me was like, maybe it was the foundation that I was missing, or what, I don't know what, but I do feel that there was something that we just needed. But at the end of the day, I did feel like Alec Baldwin gave a good performance. It's something so different than what we're used to seeing him in. Something much more subdued, much like we're used to seeing him being this big, large character. So I thought it was good, but yeah, whether or not it was the writing that was making it miss or something he was doing.
Or the direction. It's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. If I do get to pinpoint, because we're a dissecting show, I'm going to pinpoint it on direction and writing, because your initial focus on him is him not being engaged, like not engaging in conversation at her birthday dinner.
Yep.
Which, if anything, she should be the center of attention, and he's completely talking about work. And so you don't feel that connection. Then the second one is him bailing on dinner plans.
Right.
From while she's out for a run.
And then he gets mad at her when she forgets about his dinner. Yeah. You're right. It is very work
It's a setup.
focused.
And then
even in bed when she tries to come clean to him, like, listen, this, and he kind of undermines it. And she didn't seem like a hypochondriac to me. It's not like she's waking him up every night being like, I'm sick. He's just like, no, brush it off. I'm tired.
Yeah, and they try to recover it. They try and recover it with like the beach moment at the beach house where they're like in love, and they try and recover it when like he does take care of her when she can't find the bathroom. And it wasn't that there was unloving moments. It's just that they didn't show you how wonderful it was, so you were sad that they lost it.
Right.
You were kind of like, oh, I'm glad he didn't leave.
Yeah.
That's the expectation they give you.
Like the bare minimum, I'm glad he didn't walk out.
Yeah. Ugh, that's not fun.
And I thought he might. I did think that was one of the turns I thought that they could take that I really didn't want to see.
Kind of goes to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
He does kind of, in my opinion, do a little, kind of dick move.
By putting it on the daughter and saying that she's a bigger man than he is. I mean, walk out like one day, get up and leave and not take care of the situation.
I think that would have been not this film. Let's talk about this scene that I thought was really interesting and sad, where they're at the play. It looks like everyone's enjoying the play. It looks like she enjoys the play. And then she's talking to Lydia after the show, and you realize she doesn't know it's her daughter.
And she tries to recover from it.
But still not fully getting it, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
That she still was like, when they were like, this is your daughter, and she kind of was like politely like, uh-huh. And then like kind of went back to what she was doing, which I thought was really interesting. And I really liked the way that they played with certain things that this disease does, which is even though when you're not lucid, you aren't completely crazy, which I think sometimes in film you see that where if they're not lucid, then they're not talking sane at all. And she just thought she was someone else.
Right. Well, what's interesting about that, Sarah, I think you told me that the actress, when she was preparing for the role, she would only actually do things she saw somebody else do or learn that somebody else. Julianne Moore. Yeah.
Oh wow.
She spent like 4 months prior to filming doing research, and she did research with both clinicians, with the head of the Alzheimer's Association, but she also developed relationships with people in long-term Alzheimer care and people who had early onset Alzheimer's. Particularly, I believe it was like 4 women who she continuously communicated with, one even that made it to set for the day of the speech.
Right.
Wow.
And she expressed, it seems to interviews, so this is what I'm getting from her quotes, my interpretation of it was that she knew that she was never going to fully be able to understand what it was like because she wasn't feeling it, but she was going to research as much as she could, and she didn't want to extend any behaviors from her imagination. She just wanted to watch everyone and remember and try and articulate what they were going through. And her main question was to all of these patients, how do you feel? And so that's what she was really drawing from. She didn't want to just put something in there that she hadn't seen, even down to like the tying of the shoelaces scene. They had a lot of talk about that because she would see people do what everyone else considered easy or mundane task and with such effort. And so that's what she wanted to capture, was all of these things that she had experienced and seen.
I think it shows. I think it really shows in her work that she put all that work in, because
absolutely,
yeah, nothing seemed pushed, nothing seemed fake, everything. I mean, that's why it was so heartbreaking. It seemed so real.
It could have been the most angry performance of the year, and she didn't go to that place, which I think is really important. There were a couple moments she got very angry, and justifiably so. But I loved that she tried to spend each day looking at the best of it and figuring out how to live in the moment. I thought the message was really, really clear and strong.
I think that, Roxy, I think you hit it on the head. I think that's the key to her performance, is that in each of the scenarios, as we get to feel the tragedy of it, but she's acting the hope in it. She's acting the I'm gonna figure out how to stay me. Well, it's
her
like
methods.
Where, like, for me, it's like as the audience, I'm looking, and as she's answering those questions, I'm like, oh my gosh, one day she's not going to be able to answer the question, but she's like, I'm going to answer these every day. So watching her fight with this hope, it gave the energy, so much energy to the film that it's going to be sad. It's going to be tragic because of the nature of the disease, but it wasn't sad because she was lamenting in it. It was sad because like we want her to win, and you know it's not going to happen.
I mean, how great was the Christmas dinner scene when she was quizzing herself before anybody knew? You know, and she's doing the quiz. She's quizzing herself on words on the chalkboard while she cooked,
and then she's hiding them under the chalkboard.
Yeah, and I just it's her fight in it was I think was such a big part of this film, and trying to remain still Alice.
I thought it was really interesting that we hear the line from the doctor that actually the more educated somebody is, sometimes the quicker things go, which was the scariest thought. And then he says, but she's using her resources and she's really helping herself out with the highlighter, with the things like that, with the alarm going off in the morning and doing the quiz, with the notes on her computer screen. Like everything she did was so meticulous, and I thought that it was brilliant. So, you know, on the one hand, he's saying that she'll lose things quicker because of who she is, but on the other hand, she'll be able to figure out how to tie her shoe or how to do those things because she uses her resources and she's smart.
Let's talk about another very pivotal scene in the film, which is the scene where she opens the butterfly folder. And this scene comes at a time in the movie where she is very sick, but she's very lucid. She just made tea. She just kind of brushed off to her daughter, like, I can make tea, okay? You know, she has an attitude, so you're like, oh, she's doing great. You know, you as the audience think she's doing great, and then she starts clicking around on her computer.
She's looking for the headshot.
Yeah.
She's looking for the headshot.
She just is clicking around and then sees this video, and she still has Alzheimer's, so she doesn't totally understand what's going on, and then she follows the video. But it's great because, you know, she goes up the stairs, she forgets what she's doing, which all of us do. And so I was so happy that they did it this way, where she kept forgetting.
But I thought that was really cool that it's like that thought in the back of your mind, ooh, what am I here for?
Yeah.
She wasn't missing that. She didn't get up there and forget that she was up there for a reason. She remembered she had something to do, but we all go through that, like, ooh, I'm here, what am I looking for? And then she would go back down. She'd remember to keep coming back to this, which I thought was really realistic. And I love that moment. I think that, like Sarah was talking about with the research that she did, because I have known people who have suffered with this disease, or as she says, struggled through this disease. I thought this was so on point. Like she's not just completely forgetting that she had something to do. She just is forgetting what.
Yeah.
And then I love when she carried the laptop back up. Like, she's so resourceful and still so smart and still herself.
Right.
To where she's like, I'm sick of walking down these stairs. I'm not going to remember. I'm going to take my laptop.
The duality between frustration and determination in this scene built up all the way through, to me, was written so well. Because the frustration didn't just start with the video. The frustration started with the headshot. And so she was already mentally in a place where she was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then it's something that's like, it's like a train and it's rolling and she's going to do it. And then it kind of deviates and just takes slightly the wrong turn. And now it's going towards a dead end, you know, like it's just something that just slightly got derailed, but there's still that determination, and it just built up all the way through. And it's a very long scene if you look at it.
Absolutely.
And
did you think
it just feels that pressure just is constantly bubbling, and you almost get hope when she like forgets. You almost are like, there's moments where you're like, oh, I'm glad that she forgot. It's delaying this. Maybe someone will come in.
Did you think she was going to kill herself?
At the time, I thought she was going to take the pills. Somebody was going to come in, find her, bring her to the emergency room, pump her stomach. We've seen that before. We've seen that story. I was so outrageously happy that that's not what happened. I was nervous that was going to be the end of the movie, or maybe she would die. I don't know. It would have felt incomplete to me, even though it was so finite.
I think it would have felt cheap. Right? You know, like having her commit suicide that way, or like it just would have felt like a cheap way to end this really great film.
To me, it would just send a different message. Because I think what we get at the end of this is the title. She's still Alice. She's still trying. And I think that if you do end this with the suicide being successful, I feel like you're showing that you can be your own demise and that you're not going to be your own salvation. Like, I felt like she was propelling her mind and her environment and her family because of herself and her determination, versus like if she had given in, she would have failed because of herself, if that makes sense. I think that's what would have saddened me, was that this happened to her because of something she recorded. That would have hurt to watch. My question for you guys is, there's a moment after she drops all of the pills and you know hear the door open, whatnot, but she looks in the mirror and
in like 6 mirrors.
Yeah, and there's like her face everywhere, and I just kind of wanted to know what you felt from that, or what you guys thought from that, because personally I was a little confused. I was like, does she understand? Is she scared? Is she just shocked? Is this a moment where she actually does find herself and remember? I just felt I was questioning so much. So I was wondering what you guys felt.
I definitely felt like it was a moment. But honestly, I felt like she was distracted. I felt like she dropped them, was going to pick them up, but then saw so many of herself, and was distracted. That's how I felt. And I don't think she remembered who she was in that moment. I didn't see that. Not that I wish that I did, but for the character's sake, of course, I wish that she had that cognitive moment, but I don't think that's what it was.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was, I think, she wasn't lucid at that point. I think she was confused at why she was in the bathroom and something like that. I have a question for you guys, though. The speech. After the papers drop and she picks them back up.
Oh, I was definitely thinking she wasn't going to get through it because it was going to be out of order.
But she gave a different speech, right? That wasn't the speech she read to Kristen Stewart.
The whole speech was different from the one she read to Kristen Stewart from the start to the finish.
But here's my question. Did she give a speech as if she would have, like, normal Alice, and she just kept highlighting to do it? Because I didn't see her read much after that. Or did she rewrite a speech? Because part of me feels like, oh my God, she did the speech that Kristen wanted her to give. Or the Lydia, you know?
My personal interpretation was that she was frustrated, hung up the Skype, and then sucked it up and rewrote a speech from the heart.
I agree.
Because it sounded, when she was doing the highlight at the beginning and really meticulous, that sounded like the Lydia speech. Then the papers drop, she makes a joke, and then never looks down again. I was like...
I felt like she looked down. I felt like she was looking down. Honestly, I get what you're saying, and maybe when she went to rewrite it or relook at it, she kept part of the speech and then changed the second part to being more what Lydia said. But I really feel like at that point, she remembered what her daughter said. She took her words to heart. She was annoyed as heck, but her daughter was right, and so she changed it.
And the speech was fantastic.
Amazing.
Great.
Oh my goodness. That speech, I don't know if that was directly from the book or from the minds of Richard and Wash. Like, I don't know who wrote that speech because I've not read this book yet. And for those of you who don't know, it's based on a book.
Yeah, by Lisa Genova.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one of these 3 writers penned this, but I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
I agree. And I always forget when I'm watching movies and somebody gives a speech that somebody wrote that speech. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, well, it's a speech in a movie. But just like any other speech given, somebody writes that speech, which I thought that didn't shove anything down our throats, and it wasn't a lie, and it wasn't saying that she's totally fine, and it wasn't saying that she was totally not fine. It was just living somewhere in between, and I felt like the way that the audience reacted was exactly how I would have reacted. I thought that was great. And it was the only moment we really got with the son. So I was really happy to see his reaction.
And let's talk about this one moment when she says, I wish I had cancer. And I think this disease, I think Alzheimer's and Lou Gehrig's disease are the two that affect people in a way that they are still themselves in moments and then they are not themselves in moments. So when people treat them differently, you know what I mean? And she goes into that, at least with cancer, you know, people wear ribbons for you and do this. And I think it's telling of this disease, and I think that's one reason why this film is sort of hitting people in such a different way than just any other sort of like sick film, you know, a film where the main character is sick in some kind of way. And she talks about it a lot, is the way people treat her with having this disease and how she feels herself in public spaces and how she doesn't want to go to dinner parties because of the way other people look at this disease. And I just thought that moment of I wish I had cancer was very, very big and smart. And then as an audience member, you're like, yeah.
I think it's
weird.
hard. I think it's hard because I think it's a symptom of the grass is always greener on the other
words
side.
out of my mouth.
Yeah, like, because you're always, I think, I'm not sure, but I think that when you feel at all different or not yourself or incapable of doing something you once were able to do, that thing ends up being the thing you crave the most.
Well, and
Because
she's a language professor.
It's been
and
taken from you.
Yeah.
So for her, for this character, maybe I do believe that. Because her identity is fully based on words, and that is the thing she's lost, what she values most. But I don't think that you can compare them with which one is worse, because you don't know. They're all so hard. And like, you can't tell me that maybe someone who is fully reliant on, maybe they're an athlete and then can no longer run and that's what gives them joy, then whatever impairs what they love most is going to be the worst. And honestly, all of these have struggles, and it's, for the most part, I think if you do encounter one of these diseases, it's probably the toughest thing you've ever been through. And so anything probably seems better. But it's just hard.
I gotta tell you that I was up all night thinking about that one line. I don't know what part of me thinks it was in really bad taste, and part of me thinks that it was really important. And realistic. I've heard people say this. I've heard people who are struggling with one thing who have said, I wish that it was this, or this would be better. And I don't know. I don't know who's to say that. I think that you feel the way you feel, and you're supposed to be honest about the way you feel, and that's the way she felt. So I think it's okay that she did say it.
Yeah, I don't think it's in bad taste, because I think the Alec Baldwin character comes in and says, never say that.
Right.
You know, like, so you get that, like, but yeah, you get it that that's just how she's feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I had been in the room, I would have wanted to shake her. But watching the movie, I kind of thought, I get that. I get that. So I think that there was this weird moment for audience members and for probably the actors thinking like, ooh, this is such an ugly thing to say, but it's kind of necessary.
Yeah.
And the silver lining to that line is that having the guts to put a line like that in the movie and also have it make the cut,
Right.
I think is a very risky, bold choice. And it obviously, I don't think it's a theme or like a rule. I think it's an emotional statement. And I think that's what it's supposed to be.
She wasn't pulling out facts like, this is why I wish that.
Yeah, no, but you saw it from her point of view.
Yeah.
Of, I get why you would say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just one of the lines and one of the moments in the movie that you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
But it brings attention to this disease, as does this whole film. And I think there are a few other films this season, like the Jennifer Aniston one, Cake, where she has a chronic pain. She has chronic pain, and
I got to tell you, Sarah and I both saw both those movies in the same day.
Why?
Separately. It was because when you want to put yourself through the emotional ringer. Yeah, I was having one of those weeks.
Oh, after this movie, I had to go get sushi and drinks because I needed something to bump myself out of this. But let's talk about the direction and the writing. It's done there. So Lisa Genova wrote the novel, but Richard Glatzer and Westmoreland were both the writers and the directors on it. Mm-hmm. And both of them actually haven't ever worked on a piece like this movie before. And so I thought that they did a great job. I really liked the way that the story was told, and it felt natural, and I felt like it went with the way that they were telling the story, the way that they directed, and the way the film was shot. What did you guys think?
So for me, I read a bit about what they had to say about the film, and it is funny because like for storytellers, like the direction from the other films, they do relate it to some of the other works they've done, which is funny because like as an audience we might not see it that way, but they talk about how this is about family and how this is about struggle and connection and whatnot, and so they do see parallel. I can talk. Themes.
This movie makes you lose your words. I'm with you on that.
It sticks with you a little bit.
I think that's the theme.
It gets ingrained. For me, what was interesting about their story was a little bit more about Richard and have his journey on set, because he was diagnosed, I think Roxy and I looked this up, about the same
2011,
and it was like the same year that they got approached with this film.
Wow.
So
but prior to getting approached.
Mm-hmm. And then he got diagnosed, and then it had progressed so far that while they were filming, he was having to communicate. He had lost his capability to physically say words, I believe, and so he was communicating through an iPad,
giving
as a
direction
director
Wow.
of this film. So having that presence on set, I'm sure, was impactful, because yes, it is a different disease, and
He was diagnosed with a different disease.
it's ALS.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig's.
Oh, he has Lou Gehrig's. Okay.
So he cognitively can think, but he was not able to express. So he was communicating through an iPad, directing a film, which is a draining, crazy task. They did this whole thing in 28 days, 26 days?
I think it's 26 days, yeah.
26 days.
Yeah, it's definitely on the indie budget scale.
Yeah.
Great actors. And so for me, I really do feel like the story they wanted to tell, the choices of her point of view, the speeches that were written, the moments of really getting inside her head, I thought were done very, very well. And I think that does go to them, where they started from. Things I think they missed, early relationship with husband, a couple little things. I think this is a very, very good film, though. And I thought that if there's a point in storytelling, like, this is one of them, to show a different point of view about something that a lot of people get affected by but don't necessarily see from within.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if that was a goal and show family, like, I think that they did it really well.
It's interesting because they tell you to write about what you know and direct pieces that you feel like you can connect to. And I just can't imagine. This spoke to me on a very personal level, and I'm sure that it spoke to the directors on a very personal level, especially after being diagnosed and having issues being able to function in ways that he used to be able to. So I can only imagine trying to deal with all of that yourself, and then also trying to show the rest of the world that, and having the medium to do that, which is a really unique way of expressing yourself that most people aren't able to do. So I just think with all of that in mind, they really did an incredible job with the direction on this, especially with Julianne Moore's character, which is the one that I would think they'd probably be able to, or at least one of them would be able to relate to the most. So I thought that they did a great job. I think that they'll probably get a lot of work after this. And I thought the most interesting part about this was they said that once they felt like in 2011, everything was hitting the fan for them, this happened, and now it's kind of a brighter experience. Even though he was diagnosed, and even whatever it is, now things are happening, and the world just works in a very strange way.
Very cool. Now, so it is Oscar season, and this film was brought to all of our attention through the festival circuit, as most films are nowadays. So it won at Julianne Moore won for Best Actress at the Gotham Independent, at Chicago Film Critics, the Critics' Choice Movie Awards, she won Best Actress. The Screen Actors Guild, she won Outstanding Performance as an Actress, and she won the Golden Globe for Best Actress. So she is nominated for an Oscar. Do we think Julianne Moore, against all the other nominees, with this performance in Still Alice, I think she could win it. I think she's one of the, I think the women in this category, she's the strongest.
I think she's an extremely strong contender. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the actresses up for Best Actress this year. Julianne Moore, if you look at this politically, she's kind of been a contender for a while.
I think this is her fifth nomination for an Oscar.
People really respect her, love her, and want her to win one. On top of that, I think this is a very strong film that she truly carries. I think that Roxy and I talked about how this was so funny that she was like fifth runner-up for this role, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who else were they considering?
Diane Lane, Julia Roberts.
Which I don't know about that. You keep talking, I'll find it.
But so she'll get you the rest of the names.
All I think who could have done it well, but there's something Julianne Moore brings to this.
She did. She brought something spectacular to it. So I definitely think she could win.
Michelle Pfeiffer, Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
I'll turn it down.
Wow, Julianne Moore seems such a different actress compared to all of them. Seem like they fit in the same category. And Julianne Moore seems very different. Diane Lane is a little bit different than the rest, but
I think similar to Nicole Kidman. I think that Julianne Moore and Nicole Kidman, I could see it. But I think that Julianne Moore did a great job.
I think she did a fantastic job. I also just find it, I hope this doesn't come across as in bad taste, but I find it very interesting that if you look at the parallels in Best Actor category, the people winning and what they're depicting, it's very, very movies focused on
this whole
relationship
season,
and disease.
This whole season has been very depressing, but that's the way the Oscars roll. You know what I mean? Unless it's a Nazi film that they always say, like, if it's World War II, you know, if it's one of those, or if it's you have to be sick or you have to change your nose, you're not going to win an Oscar. But putting all that kind of stuff aside, I think the male category this year is so hard to choose from. Yeah. Where the women category, great performances overall.
What do we have up? We have Julianne Moore, still Alice. Obviously, we're talking about that. We have Rosamund Pike for Gone Girl. Totally different genre.
Wild.
Reese Witherspoon, Wild. Also a woman kind of fighting through some sort of struggle. We have Marion Cotillard from A Critical Darling, which I'm blanking out on the title.
One step, two step, something with numbers.
Marion Cotillard is very loved by the critics.
Yes, I love her.
She has won before.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this performance.
This one's not getting as much press. They're not
2 days, one night.
There you go. They're not doing the whole Oscar, where they like the Oscar, what's it called? Campaigning. They're not campaigning as much. So I don't think she'll win because that does matter for the Oscars. And then we also have from Theory of Everything. Yeah. And I think is honestly the only other contender for the Oscar. Not saying that Reese didn't do a great job, because she did. And she had to carry that whole film herself too. Like, that was another story piece. And I think some people would argue, and you guys have seen Cake, that Jennifer Aniston should have been nominated.
I definitely think she should have been nominated, but I have to tell you that this is not popular opinion, and I thought Julianne Moore did an amazing job, but I give it to Rosamund Pike. I think she played an insane person, and it was great. Yeah, but I think that Julianne Moore did an amazing job. It depends what you're looking for. It depends on what performance. They're completely different. A lot of them are completely different. I think that this is an Oscar-worthy performance. I do think that.
Being that they're so different, that's why if I'm like putting betting odds between Rosamund Pike and Julianne Moore, I give it to Julianne Moore, because I feel like there's more of a, like, she's had so many career high roles.
I mean, the hours, I thought it was just like the most incredible.
And so I think people versus Rosamund Pike, great job, so much press and so much love around that role, but I do think that if people are having their hands these votes and they have to pick, I think they're going to pick on history, and they're going to pick.
And I definitely agree that she's going to win. I believe she is. I would call her almost a shoo-in.
Oh, wow. And I mean, it's great that we're even having this conversation for any of the actresses. Like, that's what they want. So awards aside, let's talk money. Let's talk box office, because
we like money.
That's at the end of the day, it is show business. So this was an indie, it came through the festival circuit. It's still, it's a Sony release, but it is still in select theaters. It's not nationwide yet.
Right.
The domestic
until
total that
February 13th, I think.
Yeah, which is a Friday, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it has to go up again 50 Shades of Grey, so very different films.
That's gonna be like.
I did take a date to this film, and I wouldn't recommend it.
I bet you're a pretty crier.
That was Chloe, that was a horrible choice.
My roommate, though, took a date to 12 Years a Slave, so she still beats me for the worst date movie. But I'm just saying, this isn't your Valentine's Day movie. That's all I'm saying. But if you want to have a good cry, go see Still Alice. But it's in select theaters. It has made $1.5 million after expanding to 84 theaters. So it's 84 theaters right now, $1.5 million.
Do you know how much it costs to make? Because I wasn't finding many. I couldn't find many stats on it.
Well, you guys look. I can give you some interesting facts. So,
Ooh, go Sarah.
Please, roll them out. I love these.
Still Alice.
You always
Yes.
find such good ones.
Well, this one's a well-known one, I think, but it does include some numbers. Still Alice was part of the Sony hack. So back in November, late November, I want to say it was like November 27th-ish, Sony started getting hacked, and they put a bunch of films. Yeah, you didn't know? And movies that were in theaters already, like Fury, got leaked. But Still Alice was one of their indie films that also got leaked in November. And I believe within the first couple of weeks, it had 100,000 downloads.
Yeah.
Which isn't a ton compared to how much like Annie had or Fury had. But for an indie, that is a really big, that could potentially be a very big impact. Because this was
Absolutely.
released for 1 week in December, maybe 10 days. And it's now slowly rolling in through select theaters and through its wide release. But people have been able to access through this movie through the internet since November.
Right.
So
if you really wanted to see this movie, you were one of them, you probably saw it.
Yes. And if you wanted to see it early, and if you wanted to kind of catch up on your award stuff beforehand, not to mention like screeners went out. So when you're talking about money, that is like a kind of note to consider that for a specialty box office movie, people were able to view it early. Do we have any budget numbers? Or
I
is it
haven't been
still
able to
out?
find
I was
any.
looking I don't
There
know.
was some rumoring about $4 million, but that can't. It might have cost $4 million to make the film, but
then
that's
with-
without
yeah.
actor pay.
Yeah,
you know?
but you never know. Like we might have to look more into this one, but actors now are kind of making arrangements so they can do indies because so
course.
many A-listers are kind of buzzing about the indie circuit. Whereas when we talked about
and to qualify as an indie, you don't technically have to put the actor budgets in it. It has a lot to do with how much time it takes to film and the budget for the making of the film, which is why David O. Russell, American Hustle is technically an indie. Like all of his, that's crazy to me. Those aren't indie films. Like they have budgets, but yes.
but you are starting to
technically
see like
indies.
actors will go in as a local hire and they'll put themselves
They usually get a
they'll do all of
producing role
that.
though. So they'll make money on the back end.
Also, though, I will say, come on, just because somebody's not making $30 million for the movie and they're making $1 million instead, they're still making a lot of money.
Yes.
You know, you'd say that they're like, oh no, I will cut my typical $50 million on this movie and take $2 million to film for
For
26
you.
days.
Yeah. Sorry, I made $1 million in 26.
Just so you guys know, I made up those numbers completely. I'm not saying anybody did
It's
that.
okay.
but-
I can give you Johnny Depp. This is not an indie. Johnny Depp, average paycheck $20 million, I believe, is his normal cut. But he did a favor to Disney for Into the Woods, and for his 5 minutes on set, he got paid $1 million.
Good favor.
Thank you.
Good favor.
Crazy.
I know.
Anyways, any last thoughts about Still Alice, you guys?
I want to watch it again.
You do?
Yeah, I do. I want to watch it again. I want to wait about a month and I want to watch it again and see if it still affects me the same way. Now that I know what's going to happen and know not to be nervous at the parts that I was so nervous at, I think it'll be interesting.
I think that as we're coming up into this next year, we're about to get all these huge movies that I'm like, you have to see this on the big screen because it needs to be seen in this format. Still Alice is one of those movies that it's such a strong individual story that you can watch this on any form, like just on home on your couch, which I might recommend because you will cry, and it carries some weight.
No dates, box of tissues instead. Maybe some ice
Tissues,
cream.
box of chocolate. You're good.
Would you recommend this movie to your mom? Did you guys think about your parents at all? When you see Julianne Moore, does she remind you of your mom? Because she did for me, and I don't know if it's just because they're this very close in age. But it was something that I wanted to call my mom after, even though Alzheimer's doesn't run on my mom's side of the family or anything like that. It was still one of those things where you're like, oh. Did you feel like that? Is this a movie to watch with your mom, do you think, or no?
I'll tell my mom to watch it because I think she would like it. I think she likes Julianne Moore, and my mom also though tends to like happy movies, so I don't know how much she would like this one. I don't think I could watch it with her because I think if I watched it with her, it would make me. Sorry to my mic. I feel like it would make me worry about her.
Oh.
I I don't know why that registers in my mind that way, but like I do think that people from all ages can watch this. In my theater when I watched it, I was surrounded by people over the age of 60.
Oh.
Which I found very interesting. It was me and my girlfriend, and we were like the only two people in our age bracket.
Speaking of that, you found the most ridiculous statistic about being over the age of 60 and being a woman.
Oh, there was like a statistic when I was reading the research that I was reading interviews that Julianne Moore had done, and it was like 1 out of 6 women over the age of 60 will
is at risk for Alzheimer's.
Is at risk for Alzheimer's. And then it said something also, it was like, or breast cancer or something about breast cancer. And I was like, wow.
This is affecting so many people.
I think that's why this film is really important, because I think it's things like that people don't know. There aren't big ribbons and marches and things like that. But I think that scene where she visits the home and it's mostly women and she makes that comment, I think maybe that's very
There's
interesting.
a nod to that.
Yeah.
So would you watch this again?
Yes.
Yeah?
I would completely watch this movie again. Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to rewatch movies like this where I know I will be so sad.
Yeah. Although, of course, it's hard to put yourself through something like that.
Yeah. Though after hearing what you said, Roxy, about like maybe not being so scared of the parts you're going to be scared at and seeing different things, I probably will watch this again. It will be a year at least.
Okay.
Because it's tough. It's a tough film on a tough subject, and they did a good job. So really, there are no cheesy parts. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing to take you out of it, which I think is why it's hard to watch, is because they did a good job. And,
they did their job.
Yeah, and it's so truthful that there weren't parts where you could kind of take yourself out, get out of the story because it was bad storytelling, and then you could get yourself back in when it got good again. Like, there wasn't much of that. But yeah, overall, it's a great film, and I think everybody should see it. And yeah, I think it works on a tablet form, like you were saying, on a computer, and you can watch it on the airplane. I mean, you would be crying next to strangers
on your phone.
Yeah, you guys, maybe not at the gym where some people watch movies on their phone, but yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Cool. Where can we find you, Rox?
If you guys are looking for me, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Roxy Striar.
Oh, such depressing.
Sarah, why don't you, since you don't have anything, why don't you pimp the network?
Oh, guys.
And they can find you on AfterBuzz.
Yeah, you can find me on AfterBuzz.
What shows are you doing right now?
Talk. I'm coming up to my favorite seasons. We're going to be, me and Roxy Striar over here are going to be doing Penny Dreadful.
Nice.
And then I get going for Game of Thrones.
Ooh, yes, that is coming back.
Gotta do that. Yeah, you guys continue watching Anatomy Movie. Like us, find us on Facebook. Go to all the Popcorn Talk shows. Go to the Schmoes No shows. They're great. And they've got a lot of good interviews coming up. So stay tuned to all of the channels.
Good plug, sir.
And you guys can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Chloe West X. And I believe Anatomy is Anatomy of a Movie on Twitter, and then Popcorn Talk is the Popcorn Talk Network, I believe is the Twitter handle. Anyways, guys, thank you. Oh, this music is so depressing. It's so sad to go out to this.
Get us out of here, Chloe.
I know, I'm sorry. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please comment below. We will be on YouTube commenting back. I really want to hear what you guys think. If anyone finds a budget, please let us know. And any other fun facts you know about this film. And come back here next week for the next Anatomy of a Movie on Popcorn Talk Network. See ya!
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.